What's going on, everyone? This is Aaron. Welcome to my channel, Dumb Philosophy. This is the first episode in a series I'm calling It Is What It Is, in which we explore the meaning of some traditionally heady topics in philosophy in what I hope will be an unpretentious way, using mostly language and an exploration of how people talk about the concepts we're going to bring up. So this is the first episode. Today we're going to ask, what is the self? Or what is the thing we're referring to when we say I? What is that thing? Just some notes about how these episodes will work. These are one take off the cuff. So there's going to be a lot of ums. There's going to be a lot of kind of things that most YouTubers would probably edit out. But I'm doing it that way for a couple of reasons. One is I'll produce more content if I don't have to edit myself. The second is these ideas have been floating around my head for a while, and I feel like this is a good way to get them out into the world. And the third reason is if you like this content, you'll know pretty quickly. And if you don't like it, I'm hoping that you'll stop watching it, because I would love the people that watch these videos to get something out of them. So if that's you, really happy you're here. Feel free to email me. I'm adding an email to my YouTube. And yeah, just want all the feedback I can get. So thanks for being here. I was kind of debating if we wanted to start with the self versus language itself. But the people I really want to target here is anyone who has thought, philosophy is not really for me. And as much as I think it makes most sense to start with language, I think the self will be a little more interesting, and we'll kind of see how those two ideas relate to one another when we do language. So what is the self? So we're asking a question about a word, self. So the easiest way to do this probably is to think, okay, so the self refers to a physical thing, and that thing is my body. And of course, when I say my body, I mean whoever is saying the self, or the speaker, anyone who's using the word self is referring to their body, the legs, the arms, the body, the head, and the mind. It doesn't really stop there, because the self starts as a baby, grows into adulthood, eventually dies. So we can call that mutable, or something that changes over time. So the self is dynamic. It doesn't mean the same thing today for me as it did yesterday or the day before. We know the cells in your body are dying and being reborn all the time. Or not reborn, but they're dividing all the time, and you're always getting new cells, and old cells are dying off. So that's one way to consider what the self is, physically you. Now, of course, every person is referring to themselves when they say I. And when any person says, I walked over a bridge, I biked today, I climbed up the stairs, I fell, those are all different physical things. So another way to think about the self is to think about why it's useful to talk about. Whenever we use language, and we'll talk about that in another video, you're abstracting away from reality. Like a picture of a dog isn't really a dog. The word self, or the word I, is just sound, right? It doesn't actually match the thing you're talking about, which is your body, right? So you can package all of your being into one syllable, I. So one reason to use language, one reason to use it in this instance, is to be efficient. You want to talk about something you did. You want to convey something about yourself to somebody else. it's much faster to say, I went to the store than to reenact that process over again for the person. It maybe is a subtle point, but language is an abstraction, and we'll talk about the implications of that another time. But basically, the word I allows us to talk about activities we have done efficiently, and we are able to communicate that efficiently. Okay, so we have a body now. What about the mind? So there's a problem in philosophy, and when I say problem, I mean something that a lot of people have wrote about, called dualism. It's the mind-body problem. And this was before we all kind of agreed that everything's made up out of atoms, but the idea was that the body and the mind were two different kinds of stuff. And so we had a mind, and then we had a body, and the mind was where the soul would be, and the body was just kind of flesh. And this is big for people who choose to believe in an afterlife, because the body can die and the mind can live on. Seems kind of dubious these days, now that we kind of accept that all things are different configurations of atoms, but that was a big deal for a long time. That was, the predominant thought. Plays really well into a deity. The deity is kind of in control of the mind part of you, and the body is just kind of the imperfect form that you're stuck with. I think that's problematic for a bunch of reasons. I think everything we experience, we do in terms of an interfacing with your body. You touch something, you are working out and you're running and you're tired. You're sleeping, you're, sitting, standing, driving, right? There are so many different states you can be in at any given time. So many different sensations we can experience. All of these things are useful to think of as phenomena, which can sound funny, but phenomena are the different phenomenons you experience when you sense things. So a good way to think about this is when you look at something, the amount of information coming into your eyes is can be measured roughly in the order of megabytes of data, which is a lot of information. I mean, if you were to write that out in text, it would be at least a book's worth, right? So when the self experiences things, because if I back up, sorry, last time I was saying that philosophy is all about discovering meaning about yourself and the world. And the interface of those two things between the self and the world is experienced through phenomena. So we use language to say what the self has experienced, not because we think that everyone we're talking to can see what we saw, but because we know there's no way to imprint my visual phenomenological experience, and that's really how you say it, phenomenological, it's a mouthful, into your brain. There's no way for me to actually get you to see what I saw. I can use language to attempt to convey it. So the self is the thing experiencing these phenomenon. And I keep kind of meshing this in language together. Next week we're going to talk about language, but these two will kind of play really well together, because a big part about using language to communicate, if we try to express literally what ourselves have experienced, right? The phenomena we've kind of have had access to, right? We tasted something really great. We saw a beautiful sunset, smells, touches. When we try to convey that with language, what we're doing is we're assuming that other people have brains that are wired the same way that ours are. There's no way for me to know that my red is your red. And in fact, if I like press on my eyeballs really hard, red might not even be the same red for me. So this is an assumption we make about the commonalities between different selves. Because as far as I know, we only have access to the phenomena of our self. Then there's this idea of the ego. So the self has something called a personality. The self is a body that exists in the world with your mind. How your mind instructs your body to behave in the world can result in society or other people, or even yourself ascribing a personality to your mind or to your entire self if you choose to group the mind in with the rest of the body. You're not a dualist, right? You incorporate your entire being as one self and you don't distinguish. And I think that kind of is the more scientifically valid approach, because your nervous system flows throughout your body. And it makes much more sense to me, not being anything close to an expert in biology or biochemistry, to say that your self extends to the greatest extent of your nervous system, right? If you get pricked in the finger, you feel pain, right? So like no one else feels pain when you get pricked in the finger, it's you. And so I think that's part of yourself, because if you sense something, is it possible for that thing not to be part of you? And that clearly gets, kind of dicey. If you lose a finger, clearly no one would say that you've lost yourself, right? But have you lost part of yourself? Maybe. And, certainly I'd be kind of bummed even if I lost my pinky, So maybe you think about the self as where your nervous system goes. And if you have any comments on that, please leave some feedback. We can talk about it. So the self is a body, the self is a mind, the self is maybe an ego, a personality. It's a way of talking about your own phenomenological experiences. It is useful. And I think at various times in various places and cultures, it's been, either prized or looked down upon to use I liberally. Some people might see it as selfish to always be talking about yourself, right? But one of the things we're going to see with language is when you communicate something, right? When you use language and you utter it to someone else, you're doing something. It's not just a recollection of something that's happened. It's not just like you're recounting events simply to like duplicate it. You're actually doing something new. Like the reason we're calling this series It Is What It Is because it is what it is, and it's not necessarily what you want it to be or what you think it is. When you're communicating something, you're just making noises and assuming that the people listening to you are understanding something cohesive. But what you're not doing is reliving the moments you're talking about. You're not reliving them exactly as they happened. You're not seeing the things you saw. You're not smelling the things you smelled. You might be remembering them, but that is different. So there's a book by Paul Grice, who was a philosopher, and he was a philosopher of language. He wrote a book called How to Do Things with Words. And if I remember, I'll link to it below. The idea is that just like anything else is a behavior or an action, so is using words. So you do things with words. Great example of this, I think, is lawyers and the law. in any legislation, you can bring an action to someone, which, again, not an expert, but I believe it's nothing more than writing words on a piece of paper and communicating the message on that paper to somebody else. You have used words to act. And I guess to tie it all together, those words have meaning because, well, this is less relevant. I was going to say because they came from a self with authority. We agree that this message came from this person. This is a whole other topic. Scratch that part. Put that in a box. But the important thing here is that using language to communicate does something different than the things they describe. So the self, I think you get it. I think we got there. I think we did what we had to do. We kind of have the groundwork done. If you have other ideas you want to bring into this conversation, I'm more than happy to like do a follow-up if there's enough feedback to warrant it. But yeah, we're going to be talking about the self. Next time we'll be talking about language. And yeah, I hope some of you stick with me. There's going to be some speed bumps along the way, but I'm really just trying to help people realize that there are, fun, easy ways to do philosophy without feeling bad about not taking a college level course on it, or maybe you talked to someone and had a bad experience where they talked down to you. It doesn't need to be like that. I think anyone can do this quest for meaning for themselves in their own way. And if it sounds like you, I'd love to hear from you. But I think that'll do it for this video. Thanks a lot for watching. Again, my name is Aaron. This is It Is What It Is, my new series on my channel, Dumb Philosophy, and I will see you guys next time.